This is It's a DS Thing, where every conversation is a step closer to the heart of God. Evelyn and Janet can't wait to share these moments of Bible seeking with you. In every episode, we tackle real issues, share personal stories, and discover the beauty of God's love in the midst of it all. So, if you're ready to be inspired, encouraged, and maybe even challenged a bit, hit that subscribe button now. Join our community of faith seekers, and let's walk this journey together.
Welcome back to another episode in our Unveiled series. This is a series where we invite guest speakers and together unveil the answers to all of your controversial questions. So let's dive in. It's time to unveil. Hey guys, it's Evelyn, one of your hosts. Unfortunately, Janet is not joining us tonight, but I do have a very wonderful, remarkable guest here with me tonight. So today we're talking to Miss Phyllis Smith. So for those of you guys who may not know, I am very much in love with her son. So yes, I'm dating him. I'm not a stalker, I promise. But anyways, Miss Smith is a wonderful Greek mom. She's a cook and she's also involved with a lot of ministries. So she is very busy. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself or the ministries you're involved with?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. And I have a master's degree in nutrition, and the reason that I did that and I've been excited and interested in nutrition is I have struggled my whole life with my weight. And I finally got to a place where I found a diet that worked and that works long term, and that's a whole food plant-based diet. And I actually started doing it after we started a whole food plant-based program at our church. A doctor friend and I started that, and there's a lot of people involved in it now, and I love being able to share what I consider is our health message. And it's a joy to see people making changes. And now that I have the nutrition background, I feel like I have a little more to contribute, and maybe I'm a little more credible in those areas now. I also work with a hospital group where we have patients come in. They come in for a total of 12 weeks, and we give them recipes. We demonstrate how to cook whole food plant-based. A doctor gives a health lecture. We have small groups. They make goals. And it's been a joy to see that blossom as well. And the really neat thing about all of it is how many people that God has worked on their hearts, and they came in for their health, and now they're having Bible studies.
Wow.
And some are coming to church, and I'm having studies with some of them. So it's really an amazing thing. So
wow, that's awesome. And you have also a cookbook, right?
I do have a cookbook.
Were you working on another one too, or is it just a modification?
That was sort of our kind of our original foray into how do you do a book. So it's not my final effort, but we are working on a more comprehensive cookbook now that will have nutritional information as well, some menus, so it'll be a little bit more comprehensive than the first one. But yeah, that was our first try at it. It was fun, and we're ready to dig in and do it right.
That's good. I like it. Yeah, I like the one that you gave me, and I have yet to try out some of those recipes. This is the perfect time to pause and tell you guys all about some wellness seminars called Dinner with the Doctor. If you guys are in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, East Ridge Seventh-day Adventist Church hosts seminars in the evenings where you will learn the keys to help you gain good health and maintain it. Plus, a delicious plant-based meal will be served as you listen to an informative science-based health presentation. Oh, and yes, some nights there are even door prizes you can win. I have personally gone to these seminars and I can attest that they are worth going to. Number one, the food is delicious and made by nutritionists. And number two, the information is so easy to digest and understand that I always find myself taking notes. Plus, they are really good at making the environment a safe place where you can ask questions and get some answers. But if you don't feel comfortable at the time, you can always stay back and speak with the nutritionist and doctor personally. Even if you're not in the area but would still like to watch these health seminars, go to dinnerwiththedoctor.com, where you can find a plethora of cooking videos and easy recipes you can recreate to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Again, by visiting dinnerwiththedoctor.com, you will find more information on how to register for upcoming events, nutritional facts, videos, recipes, and health articles on various topics. That is dinnerwiththedoctor.com. And before we jump into a topic, we have a random question that we ask all of our guest speakers to get to know them a little bit better. And that random question is, what is your favorite meal to cook and why?
Having a Greek background, it has to be Greek food. And there's so many Greek foods that I make. Stuffed peppers and tomatoes, spanakopita, which is
my
spinach.
favorite.
Yes, spinach and feta, or you can use spinach and tofu and phyllo dough and make a spinach pie out of that. Cabbage rolls, that's one of my son's favorites. So it would definitely be Greek food. And the reason being is that those are some of my fondest memories, not just growing up, but even when we had our kids and they were little and we'd go to my mom's house and it was always Greek food and we all loved it. And there's just that feeling that you get, that nostalgia when you make it now and you remember back. So just a lot of good family memories attached to that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember making my chilaquiles here at home, my Mexican food. It brings me back to being at my parents' house, even though I can't cook as good as my mom does, but it still brings that nostalgia.
I can't cook as well as my mom either.
Yeah, she was a good cook too.
Really good cook. Really,
awesome.
The best.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you learned a lot from her. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So let's get into today's episode, which is called The Art of Letting Go. So in this episode, we'll be talking about the relationship between parents and their children, the struggles to see their children being independent, the good and the bad of the boundaries, and so on. Whether you're a parent or you have a parent or your son or daughter, this episode is for you. So let's get started on our very first question. First of all, I want to start by asking, how many children do you have and what can you tell us about their personalities? Like, how are they different? How are they the same?
Yeah. We have 2. And if we'd known how great they were going to turn out, we'd have had more.
That's so sweet.
But we adore the 2 we have. We have a daughter who's 32 and a son who's 28. Our daughter's a veterinarian. Our son is a businessman. And they're very different in their personalities. Our daughter has always known what she wanted to do since she was 5. She told us she was going to be a veterinarian, and we thought, well, it's going to change every other week. And it never did for her.
Wow.
So she's always known. She's always had a direction and always been very driven that way. And did not have that, I think like most people did not have that kind of direction early on in life, but realized more and more that he was interested in business and he has a lot of aptitude for it. And even though they are so different in their approaches to life and their beliefs, and they are best friends, which I love. They don't fight. They don't argue. They don't always agree, not by any means, but they just adore each other and they don't fight. So it's been neat to see.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of, sometimes I assimilate that to my brother as well, because I'm the oldest. And so my brother is 5 years younger than me. So, and I know they're like three and a half.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can't math. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that
Mhm.
that your daughter's very driven, and he's also very he has like very different personality than she does, but
Right.
they still get
Oh,
along.
they get along great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first started having kids, did you ever think that they would have a different belief than you? And I guess what do you think of that? So if you said, okay, I'm going to be vegan and I'm going to raise my kids to be vegan, but then they choose all of a sudden to not be vegan, how does that make you feel? Or did you ever think that would happen?
Yeah, I think we were pretty naive, and maybe most parents start off this way. Kids, when they're real little, are so, they just want to do everything to please their parents.
Yeah.
They love their parents.
Mhm.
We do everything together, have lots of fun together, and it seems like it's
Yeah.
always going to be that way.
Yeah.
And so I think we were a little naive in thinking, if we raise them in quotation marks right,
Mhm.
they'll just stick with everything that we have taught them,
Mm.
and they don't. They
Yeah.
did not. And you said, how does it make you feel? Uh, in some ways, at the time when there were challenges to things we believed, in some ways, I think we felt like we failed in some way. Like maybe our example wasn't right. Maybe we pushed it too hard and didn't share how this particular belief has everything to do with God's love for us. Maybe we were too goal oriented rather than the relationship.
Did you notice maybe that they started making their own decisions, or or what age did you let them, or what would it bother you when they started making their own decisions? And
Yeah. They start to get to make certain decisions all along the way. So, when they're real little, do you want to do your math first, or do you want to do your English first? And when you ask kids questions like that, your reason for doing it is now they have made that decision. You're not telling them every little thing. So, you chose to do math first. So I know you don't like math, but you're doing it and it was your choice.
Right. You're not the bad guy anymore.
Right, right. We're letting them start to take control over certain things. Or, chores need to be done. Would you rather do this or this? You get to make that choice. Now, you're still not giving them a choice of you can either do it or not do it.
Yeah.
But you can either do this or you can do that. And then they always pretty much seem to follow what they were being taught and seem to really understand and believe it, probably until going off on their own for the first time. We homeschooled both of the kids, so we had a lot of influence over them, and we did lots of things with homeschool groups. So they had lots of interaction, lots of exposure to things like once a month we would do a reading rally, which is basically like book reports and show and tell and so forth in groups, have lunch together, play games together, and do field trips together. So they had lots of interaction. It wasn't like they were in a closet for the first 18 years and then we let them out and they just went nuts. That didn't happen. Praise the Lord. But like our daughter, when she went away to vet school, started wearing jewelry, and we thought that was a foregone conclusion, that we'd studied about it. We talked about how the children of Israel, when they were entering the promised land, the Lord said, take off all those bangles and baubles and things. You don't need those. And since we are looking forward to Jesus' coming, so we're getting ready to enter the promised land. We had these kind of studies. We even were on a mission trip in Africa, and we explained this to the Maasai women who asked us, hey, you see all this jewelry we have all over us. what do you think about it? We weren't even going to bring it up. So she and I had a Bible study with these women who took off probably 5 or 6 or 7 pounds of jewelry. I was baptized with them.
Wow. Well, that's a wonderful experience.
Yeah. So in my mind, I always thought she understands, she believes it. And then when we found out later, she said, yeah, I always listened and I always looked everything up, but I didn't feel the same way. And I think in many ways, we were not, or somehow she felt that we were not open to a difference of opinion there. So we just moved right past it.
Interesting.
And then when she had a chance to express it herself, she felt differently. And yes, it was very hard. Honest truth. Very, very hard. And, you know, as a parent, you kind of feel like if you don't say something, it looks like you're condoning it.
Okay.
So we can have those kinds of feelings, like I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I didn't even notice you're wearing jewelry, and not bring it up. But at the same time, to a child who is making their own way, it can look like, you know, you're really coming down on them.
Right.
There's that balance.
Right. I was listening to another podcast where it's 2 girls and they're like, I guess, clearly not Christian anymore, but they were talking about their experience in the church, and just specifically one of the girls was talking about how her mom introduced her to certain things that the church would do. And she had said that the way that her mom introduced the church to her, or the things that she was and wasn't supposed to do, felt like she was in a cult. And so she had this conversation after, like, she went through like a traumatizing experience, and talked to her mom about how the way that her mom was explaining things to her actually hurt her, and that it was coming across a different way than she, you know, than the reality was. And so the mom, like, obviously apologized and was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know that it was coming across that way. Like, we don't do it out of, you know, and explained her reasoning. But for her, it just took a toll on her. And it was like, yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I was just abiding by what you were saying. I was just abiding by your rules. I was just going with whatever you told me, but it made me feel a certain way. And I didn't agree with it, but I felt like I had to do it. Right. And so she's older. She went to like the other extreme of things. And so that can happen sometimes when you assume maybe that your child is believing the same things you are. But later on, when they grow up, they realize they make their own decisions.
Right. And, you know, I think you can't overestimate the guilt that a parent can feel. Like, did we drive them to that? Or did they, you know, did the world drive them to it? You know, there's all these things that go through your mind. But the hard part is when we feel like they're going against a belief that we feel so strongly about, we worry about the trajectory of their life. And then we wonder, are they headed towards Christ or away from him? Now, I'm not making any judgment at all about jewelry or, you know, some of these other issues that come up. But I'm just saying, as a parent, when we feel a certain way very strongly, and we feel like it's very clear that we're given direction on this, and our child takes a different path, then what we worry about, and what we pray about, and what we cry to the Lord about is help them to draw closer to you, not closer to the world. So whatever the issue is that they do differently, it doesn't mean that they're not headed for heaven, that they're not in love with the Lord. But as a parent, we want to see that the trajectory of their lives is toward Christ.
Yeah, I can't imagine that feeling too, because you were talking a little bit about guilt and the shame. Like, there's just seems like a lot that falls on the parent. And obviously I don't have children, so I wouldn't know, but the closest that I can think of is my students at school, where if a student fails, or I can see when they're thinking out loud, and I'm trying to provide all the guiding questions that I can so that they get to the right answer, and yet they still somehow decide to make their own decision and use a different method to get to the supposed right answer, and then they end up failing, or they end up getting a completely different answer. And so I feel like, yeah, like a failure. I feel like, man, like maybe I didn't ask the right questions or.
Right. What could I have done differently?
Yeah.
And nobody means more to us than our kids.
Yeah.
So, if I see the neighbor's kid taking the wrong path, I may feel bad for them and pray for them. But it doesn't hurt my heart like my own child does.
Yeah, that's what my parents say too. They're like, I don't care what so-and-so are doing. I don't care about what you're doing.
Exactly. Because we love them so much. And if there's one thing that I feel like we should do as parents, no matter what we have to tell our children, if somebody's kid was out there taking drugs, there's no question we would want to intervene because we know that's the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But no matter what it is, how small or how big, as long as they know that everything you do is because you love them, not because you're trying to control them, not because you have any other ulterior motive, but all of us want to see our children in the kingdom of God.
Right.
And if they make their own decision, that doesn't mean they're not going to be in the kingdom of God necessarily. Depends on what the issue is, but it's our hope and our prayer that they will put Jesus first. And if they feel that a certain thing that we taught them doesn't apply, and they have talked to the Lord about this, then we have to give that over to the Lord. Yeah. We can't continue to badger them about the same things that we've already told them. But again, it doesn't mean that you don't ever say anything. You just don't keep bringing it up every chance you get. What you do is you say, I'm praying about this for you. Yeah. I'm praying for you. I'm always praying for you.
Yeah. And as me being the kid, being the daughter, I think when I listen to my parents, I think it's all about how they say it. And so sometimes when I hear my parents, it feels like they are trying to be controlling or they are nagging at me. And so sometimes I'm like, let me have my own experience. But as a parent, maybe you want to protect them from not having certain bad experiences.
Right. And so again, there's that balance. And we're all going through this for the first time. It's not like we've had other kids. Yeah. Now we're on number 12. So that makes it difficult. And we do make mistakes. And I have had to ask my children for forgiveness many times. And I think that's okay. I think there's a place of healing there because, like you were explaining about your one friend, her mother didn't realize that what she was saying was hurting her. But how wonderful that the daughter felt she could tell her mother. Yeah. And now her mother can repent of that and ask for forgiveness and take that to the Lord. Yeah. I think as a parent, if I had taken more to the Lord and said less, that probably would have been best. That's
a good mantra.
Yeah. And I do, going forward, I definitely do try to do that. If I have to say something, I try to keep it short and in love, and then I just keep bringing it to the Lord.
I like that. That's something to keep in your head, to keep in mind. One of the biggest contradictions for you was when your daughter was wearing jewelry. So have there been other bigger contradictions that you want to share that you're like, man, you're really hurt when this happened? Or maybe you as, with your mom, did you go against her beliefs at some point? And how was that? Seeing it maybe from both perspectives.
Yeah. Not being raised in a Christian home and particularly not in an Adventist home, things were quite different. Yeah. And there was some abuse growing up. And so I think it made it harder to accept what my parents taught.
Interesting. Okay.
So the one thing that I am so thankful for is that the Lord saved our family from having to repeat that cycle. So at least our kids could see, not being abused, that we truly did love them, and the things that we tried to teach them were absolutely out of love. and wanting the best for them. So I don't think there was ever any, with either of our kids, ever any just outright rebellion like,
Yeah.
you want this, I'm going to do it the other way. In fact, I thought it was very sweet that our daughter said, when I asked her, how come you didn't tell us until, I come here now and see that you're wearing jewelry? How come you didn't say something? And she didn't say, well, I knew you'd be mad or anything like that. She said, I didn't want you to feel like you had done anything wrong.
Aww.
And I felt like you would feel that way, which I did.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a very sweet way to put it. She was letting me know, I'm not wearing jewelry because I'm trying to go against you. I'm not wearing jewelry because I hate you or I hate God. I'm wearing jewelry because I never saw it the way you do. And so I can accept that so much more easily. And I just have to trust that the Lord has her heart.
Yeah.
And that he will do whatever he needs to, just like in my life, that he has my heart and he will do whatever I need to, or whatever he needs to in my life, to draw me to him. So that's, of course, our prayer for our children.
No. Yeah, there's so many instances going through my brain right now, so many experiences. And I like the way that she said that she was just like, I'm literally not doing this because I'm trying to get you mad or upset. In fact, I'm sorry if I cause any pain.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really healing in a time that was hard for me.
Yeah, I bet. What was your biggest concern as a parent about letting your children be more independent or straying away from their beliefs? And how do you think those concerns developed?
Well, I think as kids get older and they start to have more and more of their own opinions on things, and sometimes you see them making choices even in little things that you think, oh, it's probably not best. It's really hard sometimes as a parent not to just step in and say, let me save you from that. When they're little, if they were to walk out into the street, obviously you run out, you get them, you save them from that. That's very different than when they're 16, 17, 18, and they say, yeah, I probably know that I shouldn't go to this party, but I want to see what it's all about. And you think to yourself, don't. Just don't go there. You don't need it. It'll be the wrong influence. And to let them at some point experience what you don't want them to experience must be very hard. It must have been, in a similar way, how God did not want Adam and Eve to have the experience that they ended up having. He wanted to save them from that. He wanted them to trust him enough that they didn't have to go there themselves.
Right.
And I think as parents, often we feel that way. We can save you from this. You don't have to do this.
Yeah, that's hard.
It is.
Because my mom knows this, but I apparently love to learn from experience, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Like, at least I learn from my experiences. But sometimes my mom's like, don't do that. Like, I already went through that, or like, I bet this is going to happen. And I used to hate it because I was like, you have this preconceived idea that it's going to go wrong. When in my case, like, I'm living a different life than you were back then. Or like, I want, like, maybe it could be different for me. Like, I want to try it out and see how it goes for me. And lo and behold, my mom was right. Like, of course. Dang it.
Exactly.
No, but yeah, and the Bible says this too, that we have to learn from people who are older and wiser than we are. I don't remember the verse, but it says something about the difference between being smart and wise. And so a smart person learns from their experiences, but a wise person learns from the experiences of others.
Exactly.
And I think that hit hard for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I've heard it even more strongly than that. Not from the Bible. It's a saying, but it's the saying was, any idiot can learn from their own mistakes, but it takes a real genius to learn from the mistakes of others.
Yeah.
So as somebody goes tumbling off the side of a cliff, hey, we can see that and not have to go down that same path. And I think sometimes as parents we feel that way. Now, we're not God. We don't know everything, and we don't have all the answers by any means. But we feel like we know our children enough to know their personalities, and like some are more easily influenced, some are more leaders. So when we see those things, it's very easy to jump in and say, hey, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because that's going to, take you down the wrong path. And while that even may be true, we still have to, as parents, accept the fact that they may still say, not doing it.
Oh my goodness.
Doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy.
Again, the only way that I can relate to this is my students.
Right.
And just thinking like, yeah, it's not going to go right for you. Like, you better study. And when I was teaching high school, they'd be like, great, thumbs up. Like, thank you for the advice. I need to go home and do something else that's not studying. And then they come to the test and they fail. And then they still have the audacity to ask, why did I fail? I don't know.
To guess.
Right. Have there been any past experiences or influences that contribute to your hesitation on allowing them to develop different beliefs in you?
Yeah. Not really specific things that I'm not going to let them do, but with my own experience, it was more, I'm not going to do what was done to me, because even if it was done unintentionally, it hurt. So I tried not to make the same mistakes. As it turns out, I still made plenty of mistakes. I didn't have to repeat the ones that were done to me, but I definitely made mistakes and continue to as a parent. But more than anything, my experience growing up showed me things that I didn't want to do to my kids.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to encourage rather than criticize them, although I think I'm positive I've done some of both. But, in my mind, and what I always have prayed for is that I would be the encourager and always point them to Jesus.
Okay.
And I know that there have been times where I haven't done that. But again, we have that relationship with our kids where they can tell us, and they do tell us. And I'm thankful for it. It hurts to hear.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's nothing I look forward to, but it's happened, and it can be a real time of drawing you closer together because they're willing to be vulnerable and tell you. And then if you're willing to be humbled by it and ask the Lord to show you how you can do better, that can be very bonding, very bonding.
That's true. Yeah. I wish, growing up, I felt like I had to, like, I didn't have that relationship with my parents where I could just tell them. Because of I feared, and this is a whole different topic, but, sometimes I feared the way that they would react. Or I would hear them criticizing somebody else's kid and saying, oh, thank goodness my kid isn't like that. And then secretly I was like, but I have the same opinion. Like, I would do the same thing if you would just let me.
Right.
And so it was just hard to, I think me as a daughter, sometimes it's hard to, maybe we'll have another episode on parent pleasing because I could talk a lot about that.
Right.
To like please your parents, or trying to, like on the flip side, I want to do things that my parents want me to do to show them, to prove that I'm a good daughter, to prove that, like I'm part of a family because I believe the same thing you do, or either because I'm scared of what the consequences might be. and having those hard conversations. But it sounds like when you develop that relationship, you're able to bond over these things instead of it taking a toll on you.
Right.
And like you said, that there are scary feelings that are involved on both ends, but it's not that like I will never be able to tell my parents about this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
When you love somebody, you are going to have some hard times. You are going to have uncomfortable conversations. It's just part of a loving relationship. Things will come up, and it's how you handle it. And so, by God's grace, I think today, as opposed to say 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 15 years ago, I can see that the Lord continues to give us as parents, my husband and me, wisdom on maybe more of what not to do and say than even what to do and say. We know who to go to with all of our problems. We know who to take it to. And we believe that all things can come together for good for those who love the Lord. We believe that. So we know where to take them. It's how much we want to share on this earth that can be a problem. And as long as we keep that relationship first, it really does help us not to say more than we should. And I can honestly say our relationship with our kids gets better and better.
Wow.
I'm so thankful for that.
That's great. So what ways, and I think we kind of discussed a little bit about this, but what ways do you think understanding and respecting your child beliefs can strengthen your relationship with them?
Oh, it absolutely can. Well, for one thing, we learn a lot from our kids. It absolutely amazes me sometimes how these kids came from us, and yet in some ways they seem so much smarter in certain areas,
Yeah.
It's amazing how the Lord has given them gifts that we don't even possess. And so we learn a lot from them. And putting that relationship first, always making that the top priority, I feel like we can get through anything.
Oh, okay.
And again, if they were just going off the side of a cliff, if they were, into drugs or into something terrible in their lives, we would certainly be there for them. And I know by God's grace, we could get through it with them. And that, to me, that's everything. It doesn't have to be done perfectly. They don't have to do everything perfectly. We certainly don't. But together, with our relationship with Christ, we can just do all things.
Yeah. Wow. That reminds me, when I was in college for part of our education program, we had a class. I think it was something about behavior management. The professor was just really real with us. One of the things that stayed with me was talking about the relationship that we have with our students and how that will develop with trust, and how that's very important to handle any behavior. It's like you have to first establish that trust with them. And so one of the things that he said was, he gave us an analogy, and he said, imagine if a person was standing next to a snake, and they don't know it. And so you're like, hey, like, to a stranger, hey, like, come here with me. And like, they're not going to be able to believe you. They're going to be like, why, what? And start doubting and asking questions. And while they're asking questions, they get bitten by the snake. But then if there's a family member, maybe that's there, someone that you know really well, and they're standing next to a snake, and you're just like, just come here, just like jump, just move over. They're most likely going to move over before asking all the questions.
Right.
And save themselves that snake bite. And so that's kind of the relationship that we have with our students too, or in this case with our parents or the sons and daughters, that if you have that bond, if you have that trust with them, they're most likely going to come and tell you about these things,
Right.
or they're most likely going to want to have those tough conversations. But yeah, I'm scared of those tough conversations. Like, I feel like I don't do so well in being in uncomfortable situations. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I feel like it won't be beneficial. Sometimes I tell myself as an excuse. Other times, I sometimes say like, oh, like, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be uncomfortable. But my friend she is an aspiring therapist, but she was telling me that most of the times, most of her clients feel a lot better when they've told or they've confessed something
Right.
to whoever it is, and that the other person a lot of times is in shock, like, oh, I didn't know that that's how it made you feel. And so just like clearing the air or just
Absolutely.
clearing any misunderstandings seem to help. And that's when you develop that bond that you're talking about.
Right. And, you know, it really is like the Matthew 18 principle. If you have an issue with somebody, go to them, even if
Yeah.
it's your child, even if it's your parent.
Mm.
That's the best way to do it. And when we do that, that develops trust, because it takes trust to come to that person, and then it takes trust on the other person's part to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really the only way that the relationship can continue to grow. If you're afraid all the time to say anything and you keep it all to yourself, well, there's a big gap or a big wall in that relationship, and I don't want that. Even if it hurts, and even if it's hard to hear, and even if it's something I don't want to hear, I would rather be able to talk about it and tell one of my children, you know how I feel about this. You know I don't feel that that's the right direction at all, but it doesn't change my love for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the message that God gives us too.
That's true. Yeah.
That He doesn't want us to go a certain way, that He does know best, and yet He does still give us that freedom of choice. He gives us that free will. So as hard as it is for me as a parent, I can't imagine how God must feel with all of us. Going
different directions.
Every different direction. Right.
Oh
right.
my goodness. Yeah, wow. God really loves us.
I know. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, wow.
He does.
Do you think that there are any I guess in those beliefs that you find challenging to accept, do you think there's room for compromise or mutual understanding?
Definitely. And that's something that I wouldn't have seen before.
Okay.
Probably if our kids had never done anything differently than what we raised them to believe.
Yeah.
I might still feel like, there's no room for compromise. But since we have had to make some compromises, like I said, they're all different levels. Again, if one of our kids was, had become a drug addict, that's so clear. We would have to help them. We'd have to intervene and help them. But when they make choices that we just wouldn't choose, if they go to a concert that we wouldn't go to, if they do something on Sabbath that we wouldn't do, those are times where we take that to the Lord and just ask for wisdom and ask for guidance, both for our child and for us. How do we navigate this? Still show them how much they mean to us, and not give any kind of wrong impression.
Yeah.
So, if we didn't have the Lord to go to, I honestly don't know how we would do it. But praise God that we have our Heavenly Father that we can always cry out to. And there's many times where I cried out, Lord, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. But you know that our children mean the world to us.
Wow.
So,
man, that's tough. I don't know if I want to have kids.
No, I can tell you this for sure.
Yeah.
It would not change my decision at all.
No.
In fact, I would have had two more. I
Oh,
would have.
really?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
No, there.
Yeah, the challenges have not been. Now, there are
Yeah.
people who go through much greater challenges than I have,
Yeah.
for sure. But even the challenges we have gone through have been difficult. Wouldn't change the fact that we prayed for children and the Lord blessed us with them. And I can tell you today, no matter what we've gone through, I am so blessed to have them in our lives. So blessed.
Wow.
So wouldn't change that.
As you were talking, I was thinking about I like how you said that you do things in love. Like you remind them like I don't necessarily agree, but I still love you and that doesn't change. And so I was thinking when they were younger, did they contradict you as much? And if they did, did you give them a punishment? Was there like a consequence or, and I'm trying to, I guess, kind of compare to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so different when they're little. It's like our responsibility to make sure that they don't get hurt and that they don't, do things that would harm them or someone else. So that's a very different place in life than when they get old enough where now they have that right and ability to make those kinds of decisions, even if they're wrong decisions. So it's a very different place. And so when they're young and they make, if it's truly going against a belief, we would probably pray with them and study with them and explain to them how this is not the best way.
Yeah.
Well, as adults, they may or may not want to hear that.
Right.
And so we have to respect their level at that point. If your child says to you, I don't want to hear that, or I know how you feel, I feel differently. Now, how do we accept that without making them feel ashamed or guilty about it? That's really hard too. That takes wisdom from the Lord. It really does, because it's very easy to shame them and say, oh, I'm sorry that you're making such a poor decision. Well, all of that may be true, but your words may hurt them more. And now they don't want to come to you, or they don't want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. So it takes a lot of prayer as a parent and a lot of wisdom from the.
See, you don't want to make them see themselves as the black sheep of the family.
No, absolutely not.
You want to kind of let them see this is a learning experience for you. I just came back from a training and we talked about the productive struggle and how we need to let them struggle by still guiding them, but still let them discover it on their own.
Right.
At what age do you make that distinction? Because you said when you're younger, of course, you might pray with them, explain to them, kind of steer them in the right path, the right direction. Right. So, but when they're adults, they get to make their own decisions. So when is that cutoff?
I wish I had some magic formula for it and tell you we did it just the way we were supposed to, which we did not. But it's really kind of dictated by the child, and different ones do it at different ages. Like our son was more, not really so much rebellious, but he would be more challenging when he was younger, and less so as he's gotten older. His beliefs have actually fallen more in line with what we believe than maybe when he was younger. But our daughter has had different beliefs as she's gotten older, and she has let us know, when not to, don't go there. And so it's kind of like how they dictate it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with even sending a card to your child if they don't want to hear you telling them something. But if you send a card to them with a scripture in it, letting them know how much you love them,
Yeah. Yeah.
That can soften the whole, whatever the situation is about, but you're not telling them something that they simply are not ready to hear or don't want to hear.
Yeah. I'm thinking now with, obviously I work in schools, and nowadays kids are influenced by literally everything.
Right.
And so I have, third graders, like I feel like they're still so tiny, so young, so naive and so innocent.
Right.
And they're getting influenced by maybe some older kids or other kids who've had rough experiences in their life. And the peer pressure is hard in school. And so I'm thinking, if I have, my child and he's in third grade and he's getting exposed to all these things, and then he makes up his mind about something, like, should I just let him explore that? Should I really, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It all depends on what it is.
Okay.
If he said as a third grader, hey, I think I'm gonna try driving the car. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
question what you would do in that situation. But if he said, hey, I want to try a bite of meat, even though we're vegetarian, you know, is it the worst thing? Do you get the books out and explain it to them? This is why you don't, and this is why it's not good for you. I don't think there's anything wrong with letting them know that. But if they still said, like, this for an example, I thought this was kind of funny. I have always been kind of a chocoholic.
Same.
And I didn't want my kids to be chocoholics. So we raised them on carob. And they loved carob. I'd make them special carob muffins, and we'd always do everything very low sugar. And if that's what they're used to, they love it. Well, I can't remember what point it was. I can't remember how old they were, but I think maybe like 7 and 4 or 8 and 5 or something. And they came to me and they said, we want to try chocolate. We've been hearing a lot about this chocolate thing. We want to try it. So still in my mind, I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing because I don't want them to struggle with the food like chocolate. So I got some unsweetened chocolate, the kind that you bake with, that you add a lot of sugar to. And I broke a little piece off for each of them, and I gave it to them.
You're like, fine.
So, you want it? Here it is. And of course, they hated it.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know how anyone could possibly like chocolate. And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders. I don't know. And so, a little deceptive there, but I felt like I was doing the right thing for them. Well, then as they got older, they both liked chocolate. Now, our son still prefers carob. That's still his favorite. But our daughter was like, no. Don't ever give me a bite of carob again. And that's fine. That's fine. She doesn't have a problem with it. It's not an addiction for her. So I'm thankful that the Lord blessed in that way, even though I kind of brought it about maybe in a little deceptive way there.
Should have given them that like dark chocolate, that like 99% cacao.
That's what it was. And the funny thing is today, the darker the chocolate, the better she likes it.
Oh, wow.
She loves the darkest of the dark chocolate.
I was going to say, I'm going to turn it around.
No. And she credits it with starting off with unsweetened.
Yeah. But it's like that Bible verse too. It says, what the Lord meant, or no, what was
man meant for evil.
The
Lord meant for good. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, last couple of questions. What advice would you give parents who are in the same boat, or that are navigating the same challenges with maybe, struggling to see their children make different decisions than they would have liked them to?
Yeah, the first advice I would give every parent is pray like you've never prayed before. Be on your knees more than on the phone or talking to your kids in person. Be on your knees about it. And that's something that has taken some time to learn over the years. But I can honestly say the Lord blesses in ways that I couldn't have seen before. And I can rush in and say how I feel and, give my opinion. And he's teaching me more and more to be quiet and to not feel like I have to be that one to right every perceived wrong. Because God does know our hearts, and he knows better than I do how to reach one of my children for the Lord. So that would be my first advice. And then the second one is, really determine if this is an area of salvation. If it's not an area of salvation, give them as much grace as possible. But at the same time, if they're really going down a path that is obviously leading to destruction, don't let them go there without knowing that their parent cares about them and will help them in any way.
I like that it's you're doing everything in love, but you're also calling them out when you need to.
There are times.
Yeah. That reminds me of the woman in the well, where Jesus was calling her out for her sins, because it was a matter of salvation, and it was affecting her in a negative way. She was feeling the guilt and the shame.
Well, he didn't turn her away from him. He drew her to him.
Right.
While still pointing out, what you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. But he was still drawing her to him.
Right.
So, and that's what I think we need to do. We don't want to just ignore it and make them think, I think my parents are on board with this. But at the same time, we also don't want them to think this thing that I'm doing that is different from what they believe is causing them not to feel the same way about me. Because no kid wants to feel that way. Not at all.
No. Yeah. Let's move on to the last question. It's very similar. What advice would you give to young people who are learning to make their beliefs their own? So it's kind of on the flip side, because I know you've been on the flip side too with your parents.
Right. So again, I would say first thing, be on your knees. Don't go against what you are convicted is right. Don't let anybody sway you against your convictions. Now, if it's something that is not a salvation issue, talk to your parents. If they're not the kind of people that you can talk to, maybe talk to another adult or even a counselor. How can I broach this with my parents so that it goes well?
Right.
Outright rebellion never goes well. Doesn't go well for either party. But if it's something that you just simply don't believe that your parents do believe, find a way to share that. But again, through the Lord, ask the Lord for wisdom and guidance and the words to say.
Yeah. Wow. I'm taking all of it in as you're speaking. Yeah, because it's definitely, like my friend said, have those tough conversations, and they're hard. Especially when you've never done that before, whenever parents aren't used to like having their kids. And I've definitely had a lot of conversations with my mom. One of the things we like to do is sometimes we sleep together. And so we just, instead of sleeping, we just talk for a long time. Right. And so there's times where I'm like, yeah, like this was my train of thought at the time. And my mom was like, oh, I thought you were just doing that because you were just trying to go against me. And I was like, no, I was literally just learning. I was making it my own experience. And then there's times when my mom has said, oh, like, yeah, I really I think you should do this. And I thought that was the best for you. But in the long run, you chose another decision and it's actually working out pretty well for you.
Wow.
So there's times when we need to give the credit where, credit is due.
Absolutely.
And be aware that if you've made mistakes, well, then you learn from them, or just accept that there were times when you should have listened to your mom. Because moms know everything.
Well, and we certainly don't. That's, as a mom, I can tell you we don't. But letting your kids make some mistakes even, and not try to save them from everything, because every decision is not like running in the street and taking a chance on getting hit by a car. Not every decision is that way. So if it's not a decision that's that dire, sometimes we learn best by trying it and finding out I wasn't right on this one.
That's okay. And that's okay.
That's okay.
Wow, this is a great discussion.
This is fun.
I'm definitely gonna send this to like everybody. I'm gonna have my parents listen.
Uh-oh.
No, thank you for being a part of this episode today, and thank you for your time, of course, and just reminding us that that nobody's perfect, and nobody's perfect. Parents, there's a song even that it's actually kind of a sad song, and I don't even remember the title, but it was saying that when we're younger, we think of our parents like they're superheroes. And when you're older, I think the song was called Older. When you're older, you realize that they're just humans, just like you. And that, like you said, this is, my first rodeo. You're learning as you go. You don't have all the answers.
No, we don't. And if we don't come across like we have all the answers, it's much more approachable to our kids. So there's lots of life lessons along the way.
That's a very good point to make. I like reminding people, sharing your mistakes and your experiences make you more relatable. There you go.
Definitely.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome. Thanks for having me on. I loved it.
Guys, don't forget, there's a lot more Unveiled episodes coming out in our series. So make sure to follow us on our social media like Instagram, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. I always forget that one. And our handle is @ADeasThingPodcast. Remember, if you want your controversial questions answered, shoot us a DM, or if you know us personally, text us about a topic that you want to hear next. Well, that's it for today, and thank you guys for joining us on It's a DS Thing.